About 6 weeks ago, I texted my friend Ralph Stratford to say that Bill Collins had died. Ralph texted me back immediately saying it was sad news, and by the way, he was going into St Vincent's Hospital in Sydney for a month because he had leukemia. Now this was completely news to me. I didn't know Ralph was sick. He certainly didn't look sick the last time I saw him, and I certainly didn't know he had leukemia, which obviously is a fairly serious disease. So I went to visit him, and unfortunately, 3 days into his stay in hospital, his cat, who had stopped eating and drinking the day before he went into hospital, had to be put to sleep. So that was a shock for Ralph, but of course he was more concerned about the friends looking after his flat who had to actually go to the vet and do the deed. That was so typical of Ralph. He thought about other people, certainly long before he ever thought about himself, if he ever did think about himself. Ralph was a totally free and loving and independent and kind and thoughtful person. This is his umbrella, and this totally typifies Ralph. All the colours of the rainbow he would wear, but particularly the yellows, the oranges and the reds. How he loved those colours. So, Ralph Stratford, I'd known him for nearly 30 years. We met through Bill Collins, who's Mr. Movies of Australia. He was giving some courses at Sydney University. Ralph was there, I was there. Ralph said, would you like to come over and see a Susan Hayward film? I said, sure. We went to see The Lost Moment over at his home in Botany in Edward Street, and we became firm friends from that moment on. I saw some wonderful films with Ralph. The bigger, the splashier, the more sentimental they were, the more he loved them. But he didn't hate anything. I don't think I ever heard a critical word come out of his mouth, unlike me, who is extremely critical. But we got on. Of course we got on. So we go back 6 weeks now to when he told me he had leukemia. I went into the hospital to see him. He was bright and bouncy. He was on very heavy chemotherapy. And about 3 weeks afterwards, the doctor told him that the chemo had not worked and it was the end of the line. He had two friends, Michael and Neil, and Michael and Neil said to Ralph, you're going to come home with us. You're going to stay with us. So instead of going into a hospice, which we would have been perfectly happy in, I'm sure he was actually with people who were his soulmates. And more than soulmates, Michael had been his partner in the show La Cage aux Folles. They played lovers, and he'd sung a beautiful love song to Michael, playing Albin, Song on the Sand. It was one of the great memories of my life, seeing Ralph on stage playing a gay man. Ralph was brought up during the late 40s and early 50s. It was not an easy time for a gay man. Has it ever been an easy time for a gay man? But particularly in Sydney in those days when, of course, he was a criminal. And I went through his boxes, his copious boxes of things, and I came across all the usual boy type things like the Roy Rogers Cowboy album and the Wonderful Australia and the Story of Australia, and of course England versus Australia, the cricket. And then I came across this wonderful relic of another time, the 21st birthday card, because today it's more likely to be 18th, but in those days it was the 21st. And here we have a typical boys' scene of two young men standing watching a yacht. And there's the key to the door, because that meant that Ralph was now an adult. And the auntie and uncle who gave him this card said, now Ralph, you're free to explore and to live life as you wanted. Well, of course, for a gay man in the 1950s, that really wasn't possible. But he did his best, and of course, all of us have to go out there with an invisible sword, don't we? We're always under scrutiny. We have to be careful that we don't upset and rock the boat. But Ralph, of course, was never going to rock the boat, because Ralph was charming, delightful, always pleasant, big smile, and he just radiated joy. And one of the ways he radiated it was through the David Jones Choir. The David Jones Choir relates to a large department store in Sydney, and they've, I think, been having a choir for about 70 years. Ralph sang in that choir for 50 years. At Christmas, beautiful Christmas carols. It's one of the joys of life in Sydney. And there he was in his little cassock with his red hair, looking so angelic, beautiful. But of course, gay men have to be gay men, no matter how conventional they may appear. And going through all his wonderful memorabilia, of which this is just a part, I came across a programme for the boys in the band, which I think came to Sydney in about 1970. That was really a huge breakthrough play because it actually showed gay men as being actually semi-normal. They actually went out to work, they earned a living, they dressed in suits and ties, and they behaved pretty much like any jealous, envious, bitchy group of people you'd find anywhere else. All the world's a stage. The opening of the Sydney Opera House in October 1973, Ralph was there because his brother Barry was a great fan of opera, and through Barry he learned to love the human voice, not just the female voice, interestingly, but also the male voice. But his particular favourite was the voice of Joan Sutherland, and he became a mainstay of the Joan Sutherland fan club. And she sent him a beautiful letter, which was actually on display at his funeral last week. And one of the places that Ralph used to frequent was Ava and Susan's. It was a record shop specialising in film music in Sydney, named after Ava Gardner and Susan Hayward. And Susan Hayward was Ralph's favourite film star. He saw all her films, he absolutely loved her. And at the end of his life, staying with Michael and Neil, he watched it in Stolen Hours, which was a remake of a Betty Davis film called Dark Victory, about a woman dying of a brain tumour. And that was one of the films that Ralph particularly wanted to see at the end. And here's Bill Collins, the man that brought Ralph and I together, a wonderful, wonderful source of so much enthusiasm and joy relating to films of all kind. Very eclectic. And you'll see from these wonderful books, which I have seemingly inherited because they were going to be put on the rubbish tip, he was very, very interested in films, in theatre, opera, and ballet, as well as mountaineering, Egyptology, and the royal family. And he was always, as I said, colourful. If there was a few bells and a furry hat to be put on, Ralph would be the person doing it. And as with all gay men, you find these little trickles of gay culture. Here's an early gay novel by Stephen Spender, and a book by Gordon Merrick, The Lord Won't Mind, which was a 1970s paperback for gay men, and there's a history. But finally, I'll remember Ralph singing the song on the sand to Michael, and it was to Michael's home with Neil that he found his final resting place. But not only with Michael and Neil, because Michael is also the most wonderful singer and impersonator. So Ralph in the end was looked after by Barbara, by Shirley, by Liza, by Judy, and of course Betty, but Betty as Baby Jane. So it was a little bit hair-raising for the visitor to find that Ralph would be taken into the bathroom and you hear the dulcet tones of Baby Jane screeching from the bathroom door. But that's the way Ralph wanted it. The last film he saw, by his request, was There's No Business Like Show Business with Ethel Merman, and that was a song that was played along with Get Happy and Joan Sutherland arias at his funeral last week. And there's a line in the song that said, "Show people are people that smile, even when they're low." And that, of course, was Ralph's testament, and that's his legacy. That beautiful smile, as well as his belief that all the world is a stage. It's a stage on which we all play our part. Ralph would see himself as perhaps not being a star. He led a fairly conservative working life, but it was a good working life. And he, of course, played so many parts on the amateur dramatic stage, playing in musicals like South Pacific and The Pajama Game, and finally, La Cage aux Folles. So here I am, surrounded by Ralph's beautiful legacy of books. I've got loads of his CDs. I don't know where I'm going to put them, but I'm going to put them and I should be proud of them. They're in absolutely pristine condition because nothing Ralph did is crude or lazy or shabby. Ralph was consistently perfect. How many of us can say that? So, viva Ralph.